I'm Charles Epstein with the X Factor podcast. Joining me today is Alice Dawson. Hey, Alice.
Hey, Charles.
Alice is a senior project coordinator with Chestnut Health Systems, where she assists co-investigators with implementation and tracking for community-based interventional multi-site research projects aimed at improving outcomes for emerging adults ages 18 to 26 with criminal justice system involvement and or substance use issues. Alice recently led a workshop titled AI and Research Productivity, Best Practices and Possibilities, aimed at equipping research professionals with the skills to use generative AI tools effectively and responsibly. And I asked her to join us to discuss the intersection of her work with Chestnut, her recent workshop, and particularly something called neuroeconomics, which we discussed the first time we spoke. I was very intrigued by this. So, Alice, welcome. Thank you for joining me and giving us the benefit of your time and insights today.
Well, thank you, Charles, for having me. I am so excited to be here to talk a little bit with you.
And I'd be neglectful if I didn't mention that very nice, very interesting shirt. And before I hit the record button, you shared the inspiration for that shirt. So maybe you can share that with our
Sure,
audience
yeah.
who are on
So
the edge of their
I,
seats.
yeah, I like to describe my style as Bohemian Miss Frizzle. So, just Miss Frizzle from the Magic School Bus, but with a little bit more, a little more flowery and such. But I felt like my space shirt in particular was good for today for an AI talk. I felt like it was relevant and just,
Uh,
appropriate.
Absolutely. Several years ago, a number of years ago, I was at Cape Canaveral, just north, a couple hours north of where I am here in Boca Raton. And the gift shop, they had an orange NASA jumpsuit, which is going for about, I don't know, 125 bucks. I was really tempted because I could very easily imagine myself walking the dog. It would have to be, oh, speaking of, well, wait a second, is that a dog or a cat?
I am
It's
so sorry.
something
Yeah,
with
my
fur.
cat is interrupting us. I apologize.
Okay, that's okay. That's okay.
Uh,
So long as she has something to contribute.
he
Okay.
is full of contributions. Yes.
Oh, okay, good. Yeah, we may have to ask her some pointed questions a little bit later. Any case, I never did get that NASA jumpsuit, and I've regretted it ever since. But today, I actually want to talk about my new mug. I don't know if you can see it. It's
Oh,
got
yes.
it's got Shakespeare, H.G. Wells,
Oh, I
Orwell,
love it.
Twain. My mom got this for me several years ago, and I only recently unearthed that she got it when she was in London. So I'm thinking I'm going to introduce a new segment on the pod, the mug of the day.
Mug
I
of
think
the
it's a
day.
great sponsorship opportunity. So for you companies out there that want me to do a bit of a product placement on your branded mug, let us know. But we
Good plug,
digress.
Charles.
Alice, yes, again, thanks so much for joining me today. Really appreciate it. Yeah, we had a couple of great conversations leading up to this, and it was sparked
Yeah.
actually by your workshop, which I didn't attend, but I saw a recording of it, and I thought it was really, really interesting, providing practical foundations for integrating AI into research workflows. And I know it's still a relatively new area for researchers integrating AI. And you sent out a pre-workshop survey where over two-thirds of respondents were either unfamiliar or only slightly familiar with AI tools, such as chatbots and large language models. Did you find that surprising? I kind of did a little bit.
Um, in one way I did at first, I definitely did, just because, us folks that use AI and are in this space find it hard to imagine not having experience or using these amazing tools. But when I step out of this environment and this space, there are a lot of people who are kind of intimidated by AI, and so they just sort of avoid it altogether. But if I provide them answers and outputs I got from AI, they're like, oh, wow, that's really cool. And so I think it's a little bit of a fear and just not knowing where to get started.
Right.
Um, but I don't necessarily think that means that these folks aren't using AI at all in the respondents of the survey. Even those that aren't very familiar with ChatGPT and things like that, occasionally might be like, well, I'll try it out for something. And so that was part of what I really wanted to get in on, is that the fact that everyone at some point is going to pick up one of these tools, and we want to make sure that people are best equipped to use these tools
Yeah, yeah.
effectively.
So tell us a little bit about the workshop. What did you cover?
Absolutely. So I talked about setting up privacy settings and things like that. When we work in research, we work with proprietary data, as many business folks do as well. And so we need to set really strict guidelines at our organization as far as what type of data you share, what type of inputs you share, and things like that. I also talked about different tools and kind of compared their security and their privacy settings. And then I went into how to engineer an effective prompt, which included kind of a live workshop demo where I walked them through some prompts that I know you saw in the recording about different, more complex ways to use generative AI to ask more advanced questions and receive more advanced explanations, and really refining your prompts. And then I ended it with just some additional resources and other places they could go for, additional learning and things like that.
Yeah, this crispy approach. Maybe you could share what that is exactly with our
Yes,
listeners.
yes. So CRISPy is the acronym that ChatGPT and I together came up with.
Ah,
Um,
oh, so it's your acronym. It's not
yes,
sort of common use.
no, this is an acronym that I came up with the help of ChatGPT, actually. So it was AI assisted. Um, and so the crispy prompting model basically is an acronym for how to create a prompt that will get you the exact type of output that you desire. So the just going through it, the C stands for context, any background information you might want to provide for it. Um, and then we have the role that you're assigning it. So one of the examples that I used in the workshop was, let's say you were comparing project management tools that you might wanted to implement at your organization. And so what you would do is you'd provide the context of the type of the organization that you are, things like that. And you would assign it the role of a consultant with a lot of experience and knowledge when it comes to research and things like that, right? And then the I, when you get to the I, is when you are talking about the instructions of exactly what you want it to do. So in this case, I want it to compare and contrast the different project management softwares based on these criteria. Then we get to the specifics. That might be, I want it to put it in a table format, things like that. Make sure that you include pricing or any other details. And the purpose is the P of the
Ah,
crispy. And purpose really helps to guide the chatbot or the AI to refine its response to be relevant to exactly what your end goal is. And the last part of crispy is my little lowercase y. It stands for you. And because one thing about AI is, although it produces amazing results, it doesn't actively reason in the way that humans do. And so all AI generated content and things like that at this juncture in particular, still need human oversight. And so when the average AI user is creating a crispy prompt, it's most important that they don't take that output as gospel.
Right.
We need to have that human oversight and that ability to critically look at what the outputs provided. Does this make sense? Is this realistic? Is this accurate? That
Yeah,
kind of thing.
perfect sense. It's also a snappy little acronym. Wonder if you could slap a TM on that.
I probably should have before we got in this conversation.
I I know, but that really is kind of neat. So, what was the response? Did participants come away feeling a little bit more confident about their use of AI, and do they indicate that now they're going to think of incorporating it a little bit more?
Yeah, largely I would say that I got a really positive response. I didn't have anyone who gave me a specifically negative response. I've gotten a lot of people since the workshop at my institute trickling through via email and such, different staff and leadership at the organization emailing me being like, hey, by the way, I just wanted to thank you again for the workshop because it really helped me with XYZ tasks. There were a few people that are very anti AI who maintain that position even after attending the workshop. However, they still admit that they have used it since the workshop. So they're
But they're
very
anti.
tentative about AI, but they still found some utility in it.
Okay, that's kind of interesting. I think over time, several years ago, I had a very interesting conversation with one of the leading wellness guys in Europe. And this is when ChatGPT just started to enter common parlance. People were just starting to kick the tires. They said, oh, no, 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 no way. And I actually used it because he and I and a couple of others, I put together this team. We were trying to come up with a very, very sophisticated situational judgment assessment. And I had some really sophisticated people in that field who were very well known for creating such assessments that are in common use. And we just could not cut that Gordian knot. Anyway, it was amazing because ChatGPT, even several years ago, when it was in its relative infancy, did what some of these really very accomplished assessment creators, if you will, could not. And I've not put it back through ChatGPT several years now since. And as we know, it's become far, far more powerful, far more refined, far more reliable. So I am going to speak with this guy in the next coming weeks. And before I do, I'm going to put it through, put it through its paces and see what it comes out with. And that'll be a very interesting conversation. It'll be a very interesting thing to revisit with some of these anti-AI researchers 3, 6 months down the road when they realize, as I'm sure they will, that their cohort is using it in very productive ways, and it may be lapping them in some of their research work.
Right. And I think that there is something to be distinguished here between AI as part of the research design, as in using AI to actually do your research analysis and things like that. I know that there has been um, some restrictions on that currently for at least NIH grants as far as using AI in your research. However, as far as research administration or business administration and all of those processes and paper pushing tasks and things like that we need to do, as well as just being able to access more information at a faster pace in a more refined and concise way is a separate but equally important topic. And that's
Right,
more where my area is the
right, right.
productivity with it. Now, I will say there has been some really amazing work done, and I recently was a co-author on a paper that did use machine learning to analyze and create a predictive model of Alzheimer's and aging related neurodegeneration in the brain by using very large data sets. But that wasn't AI. That was machine learning. So
Right.
earlier, sort of versions of AI.
Right. No, that's a very important distinction, and I'm really glad you brought that up. And I'm assuming as it does become more and more incorporated, not just on the research design, but in the actual research side, there are going to be certain protocols, almost like a warning label or a nutrition label. AI was used, and no AI
Absolutely.
products were harmed in the process. Uh, so or researchers were harmed in the process.
All researchers,
So
no AI for harm to the.
yeah, exactly. So this field of neuroeconomics, and we spoke, you brought this up, was new to me, and in your description of it, it's seen as sort of adjacent to the field of behavioral economics.
Yes.
Some of the work, for instance, that Tversky and Kahneman have done, and you and I are big fans of their work. Thinking Fast and Slow was an amazing piece of work. One of the most interesting books I read in probably the last decade. So, if you would describe for our audience what exactly is neuroeconomics, Alice?
Yeah, sure. So, and I'm glad you brought up behavioral economics because behavioral economics is the sort of father of modern neuroeconomics, which is the science of decision making. And neuroeconomics traditionally started as decision making in a market economy. However, that has really expanded alongside behavioral economics to sort of include more of those behavioral economic aspects and looking at them from a neuroscientific perspective or understanding these patterns that humans consistently make in judgment and errors and biases that humans consistently display in not only market economies, but in other situations where they're making judgments.
Okay. So, what are some of the major distinctions between behavioral and neuroeconomics?
I would
How is
say, really, I think that the main difference is that neuroeconomics is I would say that neuroeconomics is the newer field of the two. And so it's sprung from behavioral economics. And the main difference would be that neuroeconomics is really also involving neuroscience in many of the studies where they're looking at functional MRI. So looking at brain activity
uh,
when certain decisions are being made so that they can understand what parts of the brain are activated and things like that to understand how people come to certain decisions or why certain biases occur in what situations, under what conditions.
right? Yeah. Obviously, these cognitive biases, which are so fascinating in the field of behavioral economics, and there are just so many of them. It seems that
I know.
the list grows in real time. So, getting to the core of what we talk about here on the X factor, we write about in the X files, and we talk about AIX on HR.com, which is our AI community in association with HR.com. What are some of the implications of confirmation bias or other biases that are coming out of this study, this field of neuroeconomics? What are the implications for AI?
Absolutely. And I think that you're absolutely right in the sense that there are so many biases and it's really fascinating. I believe the most recent attempt at making a taxonomy found across studies 154 labeled biases. And so confirmation bias, which is the tendency to seek out and remember and find credible information that validates your own beliefs and to
Well,
ignore and
by the way, if I may
yeah,
interject, perhaps it's a bit of an editorial comment, a bit of a digression, but I think that confirmation bias is one of the most pernicious things in our culture, our society, our politics right now. It really is an amazingly tricky and difficult and complex thing, and I think it really gives rise to so many of our problems in having good conversations, productive conversations. But I digress.
No, I completely agree. And you're actually getting at something really core to the concerns around confirmation bias and generative AI, because however you frame your question to an AI is going to define the output you receive. And so it is making it so much easier for folks to access information quickly that supports their view. And it's interesting that people seem to, because of AI's training on these massive, data sets and all of this historical information, they give it credibility. They consider it to be a credible or authoritative speaker. And so that leads them to find that information to be more credible than it might from, a news site or something like that, even, which even furthers their confirmation bias of, oh, yes, this must be why my belief is right. And it's interesting because sometimes if you ask a question and the AI thinks that it's a little bit of an intense opinion, it will give you the, however, other people say XYZ. But the tricky thing about confirmation bias is that it not only has you see information as more credible that aligns with your views, but it also has you dismiss counter evidence. And so even though it's providing you that little blip of, well, actually, I know you have this radical view, but some other people or some other researchers have found XYZ, it's going to be ignored.
For
And
sure.
that's something that is part of our evolutionary brain development, because great apes make similar mistakes in market economies, which is part of what neuroeconomics and behavioral economics looked at, was, do similar species to us also make these same mistakes? And they do. And so it's so core to being a human that it can create, I think, an even more dangerous echo chamber than when one is in an echo chamber of their social media or something like that, because it's just going to accelerate the pace of this information.
Yeah, it goes to the Y component of your crispy acronym, which I would describe or um, define as trust but verify, which is what you.
Yes.
What are some of the other biases that we need to be mindful of? There are a whole ton of recency bias, sunk cost fallacy, et cetera, et cetera. Are there any
Absolutely.
other biases apart from confirmation biases that AI gives rise to and we need to be careful about?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk all day about the different biases that AI and just living in the modern world um, lends us to be fall more victim to. However, I think one thing that's going to happen a lot with AI, and I already see happening, is you talk about that trust of AI, but also verifying it, right? And the why of crispy. I am already seeing we have something called the mere exposure effect, which is the more that you are exposed to something, the more you will have a tendency to like or accept it or things like that. And so that we're already seeing this happening with AI as far as AI integration. A lot of people are very quick to integrate AI into their workflows, into their day to day, and to just trust its responses as accurate and credible. And I think that the more and more we're all exposed to AI, the more and more we will maybe forget to continue to verify it and check the information, because the models are getting better. But again, the models don't reason and think the way we do. They are, as I mentioned to you before, and I think it was Brendan Bouchard who had written in one of his newsletters, that they're sycophantic liars. They
Yes.
are going to tell you whatever you want to hear. And so the confirmation bias combined with what we would call, the mere exposure effect can really create an environment where people are integrating AI faster into their lives and they're analyzing it critically. And so my concern for that becomes, let's say that an AI introduces or partners with a sponsor. It becomes commercialized. Let's say we don't know, but on the back end, the AI wants to sell you products from this company, right? Or maybe the owners of this AI product that you're using have really strong biases towards one belief. If you're not critically analyzing every AI tool you use when you use it, you're not going to recognize these things. And circling back real quick to that idea of commercialization, I think that's what we really need to be concerned about and mindful of as we move forward with AI.
Sure.
Because I mean, think about that. Think about how powerful that could be when, there becomes relationships between different companies and AI,
Sure.
where AI might be prone to guide you a certain direction or for certain
It,
products or
yes.
ideas. And that that's a scary thought.
Yeah, I mean, it also already kind of is baked in the form of these nudges, and a lot of the platforms that we always use. And by the way, I think that was the basis of a Black Mirror episode.
Really.
That very idea. I have to look that up, but I'm pretty sure I saw. I'm pretty sure it was Black Mirror. Um, it's interesting. You talk about sycophantic AI, and it does feel when you are using one of these tools, Chat, Claude, Perplexity, what even Grok, that you are dealing with another sentient entity on the other side. For instance, as I said before, you never felt the urge to thank Google when you did a search, but you're often
Right.
very polite in asking of Chat some of these other tools, thank you, please, thank you, great job, etc. And I think you can very easily forget that this is just a collection of bits and bytes. And I always thought it would be kind of a good idea. I mentioned sort of a warning label that periodically these tools are obligated at fixed intervals to remind you that you are dealing with a chatbot. This is not a human being, just to sort of get you out, because you sort of hypnotized into thinking you're dealing with a sentient human being. So those little reminders or nudges, if you will, may get you out of that and make you a little bit more objective and again, trust, but verify the information that's being generated.
Absolutely. And I think that particularly, right now I work in research with emerging adults, 18 to 26, and I think a lot about children and young adults and their interactions with AI. And we've already seen with character AI in the news a lot of negative press. There was a young adult, or excuse me, a teenager who had, committed suicide after his AI character, he wanted to basically be with it. And there's lots of lawsuits going on right now where these young people are having, um, really, really strong relational bonds that they're forming with these computer systems.
Right.
And there are now like subreddits and support groups for people who are felt like they or were in a state of addiction to this chatbot, their character AI or whatever. There's other companies too. Um, and now there's support groups of people who literally said, I feel like I'm sitting in my group of friends and they're all talking. And the whole time I'm thinking, I want to get back to talking to my bot because no human is ever going to have the same type of sycophantic relationship with you,
Right.
right? And so that's the really dangerous part, I think. And I think that's why we really need to teach not only us in the workplace how to effectively use AI for productivity, but also teaching young people how to critically think about AI and understand it, and really helping the next generation as well in developing those critical thinking skills and awareness of biases and awareness of AI,
Yeah.
because it does have, it has a lot of risks there.
For sure. I mean, for years and years, we've talked about digital addiction. All we have to do is go to a local shopping mall, and you see clusters of kids who are having absolutely no interactions with each other, but with their phones. But I think the AI addiction, if you will, is going to be an order of magnitude more pernicious than digital addiction. And I've actually written about that.
Absolutely.
And, I'm sure I'll write a lot more about that as more studies come in over the transom. How do you see AI being used in your work for Chestnut? Do you foresee it improving community-based interventions, improving outcomes for emerging adults? Are you already seeing a little bit of that?
Yeah, so we're in a bit of a tricky place right now, as a nonprofit, just given we are primarily NIH funded for our research studies. So with recent NIH cuts and things like that, that has made things a little bit difficult. However, we are definitely seeing the shift in AI integration into productivity workflows and things like that. I think when it comes to community-based interventions, we've already seen successful studies, very small pilot studies and such, where people have developed sort of closed loop AI chatbots that are somewhat therapeutic in nature, and they have a human, obviously um, overseeing those interactions. And they were generally accepted by young adults. And it was, like an app. And
Sure.
so I think that one of our goals in our research is to reach the most difficult to reach young adults, those in rural areas, those with lack of access to resources and things like that. And so I think in the future, and even now, we're working to develop, our tools aren't AI based yet, but we're working to develop more virtual tools for recovery resources and things like that, and access to community-based interventions such as virtual peer recovery support, things like that. And so I really see a movement toward a lot more virtual support, just to be able to reach difficult to reach groups. And I do see it being a net positive for our organization. I think thus far it has been, as far as productivity goes. And I know that as long as we are mindful advocates of intentional AI use and intentional design of AI chatbots for research and for assisting people with various mental disorders, including substance use, then we're going to be in a really good place.
Yeah, obviously in healthcare, integrated healthcare, et cetera, one of the major issues, of course, is barrier to access. And I'd imagine that
Exactly.
as these tools get more mature and refined, you'll be able to scale resources, and it will be certainly one good solution to those barriers.
Definitely. And I think it'll also help us understand perhaps more what some of those barriers are, just by being able to collect more information on, and as time goes on and we understand how AI can be useful for different mental disorders and in different aspects of healthcare. Cautiously, of course, because we're dealing with people's health here, but I think that it can definitely reduce some of those barriers for these populations that are often quite disadvantaged.
Yeah. By the way, I want to mention that a couple of weeks ago we announced that we are sort of making a pivot from sort of more general AI topics as AI is making inroads in the workplace, the workforce, et cetera. Now we're really talking about, we're focusing on AI, or the intersection of AI and employee readiness, well-being, and performance, essentially how AI lands on people at work, how it
Sure.
affects what goes on between their ears. And while we covered it, we talked about it since we started this whole project. You are actually the first person that we've had on since that pivot. I think this is a very
Oh,
appropriate and good first conversation since. So thank
yeah.
you, Alice. Much appreciated. Um, are there any other things sort of outside your work at Chestnut? I know you do a lot of other things outside of Chestnut having to do with AI.
Yeah, definitely. So, I do offer consulting to organizations and companies, individuals, when it comes to teaching their employees how to use AI effectively, as well as choosing and making those decisions around security, privacy, things like that within the IT department. I do have a Gmail that I can be contacted at for that, which is my name, Alice Dawson, consulting at gmail.com. That's Alice like Wonderland, Dawson like the creek, consulting at gmail.com. And other than that, I do some mentorship activities, but really right now I am working on, it's still in development. I am working on my website, alicedawson.com, which I'm planning on using as a resource where I can provide more educational tools for free, much like this workshop that I gave. I'm planning on releasing that for free because I just really think, I mean, I'm a scientist who believes in open access to research. I don't think that break down the ivory tower. I think we need to have more openness and less sort of hoarding over our ideas. And so my goal is to share these things openly and widely as I can because I think it's important for all of us. And I really think that this pivot you're making is a really um, well timed one, given how much insecurity that folks have about their jobs and whether or not they'll be taken by AI, how they'll be affected by AI, and things like that. And so I guess I'd want to leave you in relation to that with the comment that I believe and confidently believe that the future belongs to those of us who learn to utilize AI effectively. I don't think AI is going to take everyone's jobs. I think the folks that do not learn how to use AI, do not learn how to recognize these cognitive biases and effectively use AI are going to have more difficulty. But those who really take the time to learn to use AI effectively and mindfully and learn how to integrate it into workflows, I think the future will belong to them.
Well, I really appreciate that you ended this on such an upbeat, hopeful note, Alice.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure
Alice
speaking with you,
Dawson,
Charles.
I'm sorry?
It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Yes, yes, many more such conversations both here and elsewhere. Alice Dawson, much appreciated. Thank you very much. Speak to you soon.
Thank you, Charles. Talk soon.